Hi, this is Judy at Judy in the Kitchen. Today we're going to make hot cross buns. This recipe comes straight out of my cookbook, Secrets of a Professional Baker. It's a recipe that I used to make all the time, right around Easter time in my bakery. If you'd like a copy of the cookbook, $14.95, there's a link on the screen where you can pick it up. If you would like just a PDF version of this recipe, now I have a link on the screen where you can download it from the page. Alright, we're starting with our dry ingredients, and you can see that I like to mix my yeast spreads in a stand mixer. You don't have to do this, you can knead it by hand. I just got accustomed to doing this when I had the bakery. It makes a very smooth dough that works out better than I could ever knead by hand. So in this bowl I have 3 cups or 15 ounces of unbleached all-purpose flour, and yes, you want all-purpose flour and not bread flour, because the all-purpose flour will give you a smoother, softer, more tender bun. 3 tablespoons of granulated sugar, 1/4 ounce of RapidRise yeast, or that's equivalent to 2 1/4 teaspoons, a teaspoon of salt, a 1/2 teaspoon of dried lemon peel. You could substitute lemon zest, fresh lemon zest for that if you wanted to. And 1/4 teaspoon of ground nutmeg. And that nutmeg gives it a real special flavor. To my dry mixture, I'm going to add a combination of a 1/2 cup of milk, a 1/4 cup of water, and 2 ounces or 4 tablespoons of butter. And I've heated this to between 120 and 130 degrees Fahrenheit, and you do need to do that temperature when you're dealing with RapidRise yeast. Now I'm just going to stir this together, and then I'm going to add in 2 whole eggs. Anytime you're baking, you want to deal with large eggs. And I'm just going to stir this together and combine the ingredients the best I can, just to help moisten the flour so that I don't have flour dust all over the kitchen when I put this in the mixer. Now to this, I'm also going to add some dried fruit. And to this, I'm going to add a 1/2 cup of currants. And you can see the currants are very tiny. They look like little raisins. They're not quite raisins, but if you can't find currants in your grocery store, and some stores don't carry them, you could substitute raisins if you wanted to. And then I have a 1/4 cup of sweetened dried pineapple that I've chopped up very finely. It does kind of stick together, but it will come apart, separate while it's being kneaded in the mixer. I've chopped it up very finely because the pieces of pineapple come pretty large, way too large for something like this. Okay, so I'm going to put this in my stand mixer and knead it with the bread dough for 8 to 10 minutes. If you're doing this by hand, you want to knead it on a lightly floured board for the same amount of time, 8 to 10 minutes. Be careful not to work in too much extra flour if you're kneading it by hand. Alright, my dough has been kneaded. I wanted to mention that in the meantime, while the dough was kneading in the mixer, I warmed up my oven by turning on the oven light, putting the bottom rack on the very bottom of the oven, and I brought a small pan of water to boil, and I placed that pan of boiling water on the bottom rack. And the top rack, which is in the middle of the oven, is where I'm going to allow these buns to proof and to rise for about a 1/2 hour after I form them. And that trick is something that I developed when I had the bakery. It takes the place of a proof box, which is what you have in large bakeries. It's a moist, warm environment that is perfect for the yeast to develop. And so that makes a great substitute for your home when you're baking at home. Okay, I have a lightly floured board here, and I'm not going to work in a lot of extra flour. I'm just doing this so that I can make this dough easy to cut. Now I have a 9x13 pan that has been sprayed with nonstick spray. And you can get fancy and weigh these out, which I used to do in the bakery, but for home use you don't have to do that. I'm going to just cut the dough into 12 pieces. You see the dough is sticky, which is good. You want it sticky, you don't want it too dry. And now I'm going to cut these into 12 pieces, and I'll show you what it looks like when I get them on the pan. You can see I have 12 nicely formed little buns here, and I've spread them out evenly in my 9x13 pan. And I'm going to put these on the rack that's in the middle of the oven over that pan of boiling water, and just allow it to proof in there for about 30 minutes until they're doubled in size. These buns are ready to go. You can see that they have spread out and risen quite a bit, and they were in the oven proofing for about 30 minutes. Now I've taken them out, taken the pan of boiling water out of the oven, and I've got it preheating to 350 degrees. And once the oven is preheated, I'm going to bake these for 15 to 18 minutes until they're golden brown, and then I'll show you what they look like when they come out. My buns took right at 30 minutes to rise, and they look really good. So I've taken the pan of water out of the oven, and I've got the oven preheating to 350 degrees. In the meantime, I have a small bowl here with 1 egg white that I have beaten with 2 tablespoons of water. And this is going to add just a nice shine to these buns. And so I'm just taking a little pastry brush here, which is just really a 2-inch paintbrush, and just brushing that lightly on top. You don't want to overdo it. You want to be careful with it so you don't force them to go down. And just brush it lightly, and then when the oven is preheated, I'm going to put these in there and let them bake at 350 for 15 to 18 minutes until they're golden brown, and then I'll show you what they look like when they're finished. These are straight out of the oven. They baked right at 17 minutes, and they look fabulous. I'm going to allow them to cool in the pan for just a little bit, and then I'm going to flip them out and put them on a cooling rack and allow them to cool completely before we decorate them. Now while the buns are cooling, you can mix up your frosting, and what I've done is I've taken 1 cup of confectioner's sugar and about 1 tablespoon plus 1 teaspoon of milk. You want to be careful about how much milk you add to it, and a ½ teaspoon of vanilla extract, and you mix it up really, really well in a bowl. If you have a piping bag and piping tips, that's great. You would use a very, very small round tip. If you don't, we're going to keep it simple. We're going to mix that up real fine and put it into a plastic bag, which I've got here. And you scrape it down until it gets to the bottom of a point on there. And I have not cut anything in here yet, but what you're going to do is squeeze it down to that point. Turn your bag like this so that you can really get a good grip on that, and you're going to cut a tiny hole down here in the corner, and that's what you're going to use to pipe it with. I'm going to let the rolls cool just a little bit more, and then we're going to pipe our designs. Okay, I am ready to cut a small hole in this bag, and when you're working like this, you may need to adjust that a time or two till you get it where you want it. Alright, now I'm going to begin piping across on this, and they're not going to be absolutely perfect, and that's quite okay. And for those of you who don't want to put a cross on there, you can put any design you want. And I'm just going to do that on a couple of these just so you can see. Why not do a squiggle like that? You squeeze as you go. Squeeze your hand as you go. Squeeze the bag. So you're squeezing just a little bit out. And you see I cut just a tiny hole, but it still is making a very big design here. So you want just the tiniest hole if you don't have piping materials, your tips and bags and so forth. It doesn't take much. And you can see it takes very little frosting. I could have made probably 1/4 of the amount, and I only used a cup of confectioner's sugar. And so a little bit of this goes a long way because we're not coating them completely like you would a cinnamon bun. Let me encourage you to give this recipe a try. Let me know in the comments below how it works for you. This is Judy at Judy in the Kitchen. Happy baking!